The shimmering waters of Marcus Thompson's infinity pool reflected the afternoon sun like scattered diamonds across the surface. Music drifted through the air, not blaring but loud enough to set a festive mood as 30-something professionals mingled around the expansive backyard of 44 Oakwood Lane. Some guests floated on colorful inflatables while others lounged under market umbrellas, sipping craft cocktails, the perfect respite from the punishing July heat wave that had gripped Meadowbrook Estates for the past week. Marcus, an unassuming real estate developer with salt and pepper hair and an easy smile, moved through the crowd, making sure everyone had what they needed. At 42, he had the quiet confidence of someone who had built success from nothing. What most of his guests didn't know, what almost nobody in the neighborhood knew, was that Marcus owned not just this house, but every single property on Oakwood Lane. It was information he kept close to his chest, preferring to be known as just another friendly resident rather than the landlord of the entire street. "Marcus, these mojitos are incredible," called out Daphne, one of his tenants from 3 doors down, raising her glass. "I need the recipe." He was about to respond when he noticed a commotion at the far end of his lawn. A woman with a blonde, bob-cut, and oversized designer sunglasses was standing at the property line, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, phone pressed to her ear. Even from this distance, her rigid posture radiated displeasure. Excusing himself, Marcus made his way across the lawn, his smile never faltering even as he recognized the woman. Patricia Winters had moved into the neighborhood just 6 months ago, renting the Colonial at the corner of Oakwood and Pine. Already she had made herself notorious among the other tenants for her complaints about everything from garbage placement to the color of holiday decorations. "Absolutely unacceptable noise levels," Patricia was saying into her phone as Marcus approached. "I'd already asked them twice to turn it down, and they've completely ignored me. I need an officer here immediately." Marcus raised an eyebrow. He hadn't seen Patricia approach anyone at the party, let alone twice. "Patricia," he greeted her warmly, extending his hand. "I don't think we formally met. I'm Marcus Thompson, your neighbor from number 44. Is everything all right?" Patricia lowered her phone slightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "No, everything is not all right. This party is disrupting the entire neighborhood. It's 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday. People are trying to relax in their homes." Marcus glanced around at the other nearby houses, seeing several of his tenants actually attending the party, while others had their windows open to catch the music. Nobody else seemed bothered. "I'm sorry to hear it's disturbing you," Marcus said genuinely. "I can certainly turn the music down a bit." "I've already called the police," Patricia announced, lifting her chin. "This isn't the first disturbance from this address, and the neighborhood association will be hearing about it." Marcus suppressed a smile. There was no neighborhood association. He had disbanded it after acquiring the final property 2 years ago, finding it unnecessary when he could personally address any legitimate concerns. "The police? That seems a bit extreme for a Sunday afternoon gathering that's well within noise ordinance limits," he said calmly. Patricia's eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. "I know my rights. This is a residential area, not a nightclub, and I've documented every incident of disturbance." As if on cue, a police cruiser turned slowly onto Oakwood Lane, and Marcus could see Patricia's expression shift to something approaching satisfaction. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that the arriving officer was Dave Ramirez, who happened to be not only the community liaison officer but also Marcus's former college roommate and current tenant in the Tudor-style house across the street. Marcus took a deep breath. This wasn't how he had planned to reveal his unique position in the neighborhood, but Patricia Winters had just forced his hand. Officer Dave Ramirez stepped out of his patrol car, adjusting his hat as he surveyed the scene. His expression remained professional, but Marcus caught the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, a suppressed smile. Dave had attended plenty of Marcus's gatherings before, usually off-duty with a beer in hand rather than responding to a noise complaint. "Afternoon, folks," Dave said, approaching Patricia and Marcus. "We received a call about a disturbance." Patricia straightened her designer blouse and stepped forward eagerly. "Yes, officer. I'm Patricia Winters from number 17. I called about the excessive noise from this party." She gestured dismissively toward Marcus's backyard. "It's been going on for hours, and it's completely disrupting the peace of our community." Dave nodded, taking out his notepad with practiced efficiency. "I see. And you've attempted to resolve this with the homeowner first?" "Of course I have," Patricia said, though Marcus noticed her avoiding eye contact. "They were completely unresponsive to my reasonable requests." Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, Officer Ramirez, this is the first I've heard of any concerns from Ms. Winters today. I'd be happy to address them now." Dave's eyebrows rose slightly at the formality. Marcus typically called him by his first name, but he quickly caught on that his friend was maintaining professional appearances. "Mr. Thompson," Dave acknowledged with a nod. "I don't actually hear anything excessive from here. What's the volume level at currently?" Patricia interjected before Marcus could answer. It was much louder before I called. They obviously turned it down when they saw your car approaching. Dave glanced at his watch. Ma'am, I received this call 4 minutes ago and was already in the area. That doesn't give much time for adjustments. A small crowd had begun to gather at the edge of the yard, party guests curious about the police presence. Among them was Eliza Chen, a defense attorney who lived 2 doors down from Marcus. Is there a problem, officer? Eliza asked, approaching the group. Patricia turned to her with an expression of vindication. Yes, this excessive party is disrupting the entire neighborhood. I'm glad someone else is concerned enough to speak up. Eliza blinked in confusion. Actually, I was enjoying the music from my patio before I walked over. Several of us were just saying how nice it is to have some life in the neighborhood during this heat wave. She turned to Marcus. The Bensons down the street even opened their windows to hear better while they're painting their living room. Patricia's face flushed. Well, I find it completely inappropriate, and as a homeowner, renter, Marcus corrected gently. Patricia froze mid-sentence. Excuse me? You're renting number 17, not a homeowner, Marcus clarified. Which is perfectly fine, of course. Most people on this street are renters. Patricia's eyes narrowed. How would you know my housing situation? An uncomfortable silence fell over the small gathering. Dave shifted his weight from one foot to another, suddenly very interested in his notepad. Eliza's eyes widened slightly as she realized where this conversation was heading. Because, Marcus said with a slight sigh, I'm your landlord, Patricia. I own number 17, and numbers 19 through 42. And he gestured around the street? Well, all of them. Actually. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. That's not possible. I rent through Meadowbrook Property Management, which is my company, Marcus explained. I prefer to keep a low profile. Most tenants appreciate not having their landlord as a next-door neighbor, so I operate through the management company for day-to-day matters. Dave cleared his throat, putting away his notepad. Well, it appears there's no noise violation occurring here. The current volume is well within daytime ordinance limits. He turned to Patricia. Ms. Winters, in the future, I'd recommend speaking directly with neighbors about concerns before calling emergency services. We take noise complaints seriously, but we also need to prioritize actual emergencies. Patricia's face had turned a deep shade of red. Around them, more party guests had gathered, many of whom Marcus now realized were recognizing for the first time that their friendly neighbor was actually their landlord. This is inappropriate, Patricia sputtered. There must be laws against this. Owning an entire street. It's monopolistic. Marcus shook his head. It's perfectly legal. I developed this subdivision myself 5 years ago, sold a few homes initially, but then started buying them back as investment properties when the opportunity arose. Eventually, I own them all. Eliza, ever the attorney, couldn't help adding, there's no law against owning multiple. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Patricia stood frozen, her expression cycling through disbelief, embarrassment, and calculation. The gathered neighbors watched with undisguised interest. This was better entertainment than anything the pool party had offered so far. I think I'll pass on the drink, Patricia finally said, her voice tight. But I would appreciate if you could turn down the music. Some of us are trying to enjoy a peaceful Sunday. Before Marcus could respond, another voice joined the conversation. Oh, for heaven's sake, Patricia, enough already. The crowd parted as Eleanor Simmons, a silver-haired woman in her 70s, approached with the aid of a floral-patterned cane. Despite her advanced age, Eleanor moved with purpose, her eyes sharp behind bifocals. I've lived in this neighborhood for 50 years, long before Marcus bought up these properties, and I've never seen someone make such a fuss over a perfectly reasonable gathering. Patricia blinked in surprise. Mrs. Simmons, you're bothered by this too, aren't you? You're always talking about how you value your afternoon nap. Eleanor snorted. Child, I was trying to nap until your screeching voice and that police siren woke me up. The music was actually quite pleasant background noise. She turned to Marcus. Though I wouldn't mind if you added some Motown to your playlist, dear. These modern tunes all sound like robots having indigestion. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, easing the tension. Even Officer Ramirez cracked a smile. I'll make sure to add some Temptations just for you, Eleanor, Marcus promised, then addressed Patricia again. I understand wanting peace and quiet. How about a compromise? We'll move the speakers to face away from your house and lower the volume a bit. The party will wrap up by 7 anyway. Patricia looked around, suddenly aware that she lost whatever ground she thought she had. Fine, she said curtly, but I'll be documenting everything in case the terms of my lease have anything to say about noise disturbances. Marcus nodded, keeping his expression neutral. You're welcome to review your lease agreement, though I should mention that as your landlord, I'm also responsible for ensuring quiet enjoyment of your rental property, which works both ways. Tenants are entitled to reasonable peace, but also expected to tolerate reasonable neighborhood activities. Eliza Chen, ever the lawyer, couldn't help adding, and repeatedly making unfounded complaints to police could potentially constitute harassment under Municipal Code Section 42.3, which might actually violate paragraph 14 of the standard Meadowbrook lease regarding community standards of behavior. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. Are you threatening me? Not at all, Marcus interjected smoothly. Just clarifying expectations. Neighbors sometimes have different preferences, and we all need to find middle ground. He gestured toward his backyard. You're welcome to join the party, Patricia. It might be a good way to meet more of your neighbors. Patricia looked at the offered olive branch as if it were a poisonous snake. I think I'll pass, she said coldly before turning on her heel to march back toward her house. Officer Ramirez cleared his throat. Well, seems like this situation is resolved. I'll be on my way. He tipped his hat to Eleanor. Mrs. Simmons, always a pleasure. As the police car pulled away and the small crowd began to disperse, Marcus felt a tug on his sleeve. It was Daphne, the tenant who had complimented his mojitos earlier. So, she said with a raised eyebrow, were you ever going to tell us that you were essentially the king of Oakwood Lane? Marcus laughed, running a hand through his hair. It honestly never seemed relevant. I didn't want it to change how people treated me. Well, it explains why maintenance requests get handled so quickly, Daphne mused, and why their rent increases have been reasonable compared to the rest of the city. Eleanor joined them, leaning on her cane. I always knew, of course, she said with a wink. Nothing happens on this street without me noticing. I sold you my house 3 years ago, remember? But I appreciated you letting me stay on as a tenant when the stairs got too much for my knees. Marcus smiled warmly at the older woman. Best decision I ever made. Your cookie recipes alone make it worth it. As they walked back toward the pool, Eliza fell into step beside them. You know she's going to be trouble now, she said quietly, nodding in the direction of Patricia's house. Hell have no fury like a Karen scorn in front of the neighborhood. Marcus sighed. I know, but what can she really do? The community room at the Meadowbrook Public Library buzzed with unusual energy for a Thursday evening. Every chair was filled with additional residents standing along the walls. Marcus sat in the back row, observing silently as Patricia Winters stood at the podium, midway through what could only be described as a passionate presentation. And so, Patricia continued, clicking to a new slide in her meticulously prepared PowerPoint. I believe we must question whether concentrated property ownership serves the best interests of our community. She pointed to a pie chart showing that 100% of Oakwood Lane properties belong to Marcus Thompson. When one individual controls an entire neighborhood, where are the checks and balances? Marcus had to admire her thoroughness. In just 5 days, Patricia had not only created a detailed presentation, but had also managed to convince the Meadowbrook Neighborhood Association to hold a special meeting. The official topic was property ownership, diversity, and community governance, but everyone knew it was really the Marcus Thompson situation. From his seat, Marcus could see Eleanor Simmons in the front row, occasionally shaking her head at Patricia's more dramatic statements. Eliza Chen sat nearby, taking notes with a focused expression that Marcus recognized from their conversations about the situation over the past few days. Furthermore, Patricia said, her voice rising slightly, I've discovered that Mr. Thompson's company, Meadowbrook Property Management, has systematically acquired 28 properties in other neighborhoods as well. This pattern of acquisition raises serious questions about market consolidation and housing affordability. A murmur ran through the audience. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he winced. His business strategies were legal and ethical, but he had always preferred to operate without drawing attention to the scale of his investments. Thank you, Ms. Winters, said Hector Gomes, the association's president, as Patricia concluded her presentation. Now, as I understand it, Mr. Thompson is here tonight. Would you like to respond to these concerns? All heads turned toward Marcus as he stood and made his way to the front of the room. He hadn't planned to speak, but Patricia's presentation had made that impossible. Good evening, everyone, he began, his voice calm and measured. First, I want to thank Ms. Winters for her obvious dedication to community issues. It's important that we all care about where we live. Patricia crossed her arms, clearly not expecting this approach. I've lived in Meadowbrook for almost 15 years, Marcus continued. I started buying properties here because I believe in this community, its schools, its parks, its people. Yes, I own all the houses on Oakwood Lane, and yes, my company manages properties in other neighborhoods too. He paused, looking around the room. But I'd like to address some of the concerns raised tonight with facts. First, regarding rent increases, my average annual increase has been 1.7% over the past 5 years, well below the city average of 4.3%. On property maintenance, my company responds to maintenance requests within 24 hours, with an average resolution time of 2.3 days, again better than industry standards. Marcus nodded to Jasmine, who had joined him at the front and was distributing folders to the association board members. These packets contain verification of these statistics, along with testimonials from current and former tenants. That's all well and good, Patricia interjected, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue of one person controlling an entire neighborhood. I understand that concern, Marcus acknowledged, but I'd like to ask, what specifically has changed for the residents of Oakwood Lane since discovering I own all the properties? Have your homes become less comfortable? Has your quality of life decreased? A thoughtful silence fell over the room. Finally, Eleanor Simmons raised her hand. If I may, she said, rising slowly with the help of her cane. I've lived on Oakwood Lane for 50 years. I've seen 3 different landlords before Marcus bought my house. None of them fixed my leaky roof as quickly as he did. None of them kept my rent stable when my Social Security barely increased. She turned to face the room. I don't care who owns the house as long as they treat me fairly. Several heads nodded in agreement. Daphne Chen stood up next. I've lived in 3 different rentals in Meadowbrook. Marcus is the only landlord who's ever returned my full security deposit. And when my water heater broke last winter, it was replaced the same day. One by one, other tenants from Oakwood Lane and beyond stood to share similar experiences. Not all were glowing testimonials. There were legitimate complaints about. The Meadowbrook City Council chambers were packed to capacity. What had begun as a routine zoning meeting had transformed into something approaching a community spectacle after word spread that Patricia Winters would be presenting evidence of alleged zoning violations on Oakwood Lane. Camera crews from 2 local news stations hovered near the back wall, while reporters from the Meadowbrook Chronicle scribbled notes. Marcus sat in the 3rd row, flanked by Eliza Chen and Jasmine from his office. In the weeks since the neighborhood association meeting, he'd been working with his legal team to understand exactly what Patricia might have discovered. The uncertainty had kept him awake for several nights. All rise for Mayor Richardson and the Meadowbrook City Council, announced the clerk as 5 council members and the mayor filed in and took their seats at the elevated panel. After preliminary business, Mayor Richardson, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, addressed the room. We now move to public comments. I understand Ms. Patricia Winters has requested time to address the council regarding zoning regulations on Oakwood Lane. Patricia approached the podium with a leather portfolio and what looked like several rolled maps. She wore a crisp blazer and had styled her hair more formally than usual, clearly understanding the importance of presentation. Thank you, Mayor Richardson and council members. Patricia began, her voice steady. 2 weeks ago, I discovered that every home on Oakwood Lane is owned by a single individual, Marcus Thompson, operating through Meadowbrook Property Management. She paused for effect, but the revelation didn't cause the stir she clearly hoped for. Most people in the room already knew this from the neighborhood meeting or subsequent gossip. Undeterred, Patricia continued, while researching this unusual ownership concentration, I uncovered something far more concerning. In 2018, when Mr. Thompson was developing the extension of Oakwood Lane, the council approved a variance to allow for higher density residential development under Ordinance 42B with specific conditions. Now she had the council's attention. Mayor Richardson leaned forward slightly. Those conditions, Patricia continued, unrolling one of her maps across the podium, included maintaining a minimum of 15% of the development as commonly owned green space and ensuring at least 20% of housing units qualified as affordable housing under the city's guidelines. Marcus felt a cold sensation spraying through his chest. He remembered those conditions. They had been part of his original development plan. As you can see from these property records, Patricia said, displaying a series of documents on the overhead projector, the community green space was eventually subdivided and sold as additional residential lots in 2019, and there are currently 0 units on Oakwood Lane that meet affordable housing criteria. A murmur ran through the audience. Marcus's mind raced. These were accurate observations, but they lacked critical context. If these violations are confirmed, Patricia concluded, I believe the council should review all of Mr. Thompson's property holdings for similar violations and consider appropriate penalties, which could include mandated divestiture of properties acquired through improper zoning processes. The chambers erupted in chatter. Mayor Richardson banged her gavel for order. Thank you, Ms. Winters, she said. Mr. Thompson, as the property owner in question, would you like to respond? Marcus took a deep breath as he approached the podium. Patricia gave him a tight smile as they passed each other, confidence radiating from her posture. Mayor Richardson, council members, thank you for the opportunity to address these concerns, Marcus began. Ms. Winters has presented some factually accurate information, but without critical context that I believe will clarify this situation. He motioned to Jasmine, who approached with a thumb drive that she handed to the clerk to load onto the projector system. The original development plan for Oakwood Lane extension did indeed include the conditions Ms. Winters mentioned. However, on February 12, 2019, I submitted a modified development plan, which was reviewed and approved by this council on March 24, 2019. The screen now displayed the council minutes from that meeting with the relevant section highlighted. Rather than maintaining green space within the development itself, the modified plan included my purchase and donation of 22 acres adjacent to Meadowbrook Park, more than triple the green space that would have been created in the original plan. This land became the Meadowbrook Nature Preserve, which the city opened to the public last year. Several council members nodded in recognition. The nature preserve had been a significant